Good afternoon, Tracy.
Afternoon, David.
Welcome to the channel. So today I'm welcoming Tracy Newbury-Abegg, who qualified with Animas with our accredited diploma in transformational coaching back in 2020, and 2 years later qualified with our diploma in coaching supervision in 2022, which was with our sister school, the ICCS. Since qualifying, she has balanced her coaching and supervision practice with a part-time role at the charity Yes Futures. More to come on that later. But she has recently taken a break from coaching and supervision to focus on becoming a mum for her young son. But this hasn't stopped you, Tracy, from taking the time to further your learning and development as a coach as you consider your next steps. So it's fantastic to have you here, and I would love to hear about the work that you do with Yes Futures charity.
Yeah, so first of all, thank you for having me. Yes, Futures. So that all came about actually when I started my diploma with Animas. So I actually signed up for the diploma um kind of quite a few months ahead of being able to start it, but we got let into the Animas Lounge early and someone posted about a volunteering opportunity where they needed coaches and you didn't need to be qualified. So I was like, this is going to be great practice. So I actually volunteered with Yes Futures in 2018 alongside doing my diploma. That went really well, really enjoyed it. And then it was kind of towards middle to end of 2019 that I was looking to go down from a full-time job to a part-time role so that I could balance it with my coaching.
Yeah.
And I just sent Sarah an email. Sarah's the CEO of Yes Futures. I sent her an email just saying, "Oh look, if anything part-time comes up, I'd really appreciate knowing." It was really funny because she replied saying, "I'm literally just posting a role on Charity Job that sounds right up your street." So yeah, there were two roles. One was a full-time one was a part-time one. Going back into admin, which is kind of what I've always worked in. And yeah, so I since October 2019, I've been with Yes Futures as their finance and admin officer, but it's great because part of your training at Yes Futures, whatever role you're in, is to kind of have that coaching experience with the students to understand the programs that we run in the schools. So I got to do that again when I started in the October, having done it in 2018. And yeah, if we've ever got a coach that's ill or we're a little bit short, they just put a shout out to the team, and if I'm not too busy, I'm usually quite happy to jump in and do a bit of coaching. So I'm glad I still get to do it every now and again through my kind of part-time role.
Thanks, Tracy. We had a great chat before the call, and you mentioned that Yes Theory is a very big, Yes Futures are a very big part of your life now. I wondered if you could tell us a bit more about who they are and what they do.
Definitely. So, Yes Futures is a small charity. We're based in kind of London in the south of England at the moment. And we take youth coaching programs into schools, so primary and secondary schools. In primary schools, we've got our Finding Futures program. So we work with years 5 and 6, looking at that transition to secondary school, um, all of the excitement and challenges that that can bring. Um, they get to work with their coaches in person, the students at the primary schools. So we will have 2 or 3 coaches come into school and work with the students in small groups. Then for the secondary students, their program is called Rising Futures. We'll basically work with kind of any age group, but it tends to be years 7 to 9 are the most common, avoiding those kind of exam times. And there's a real focus on kind of thinking about their future, what career they might like to do, kind of what their interests are, leaning into that, and kind of pushing them out of their comfort zone. So with both programs, the students will get five, 4 coaching sessions each, and then they get 2-day trips. So our first one is into the wild. They get to go to an activity centre for a day, try out different activities that maybe they've not had the opportunity to do before. As I said, there's that element of pushing yourself out of your comfort zone. So if you've got a fear of heights, then maybe it's a good chance to do some abseiling and have the support of your classmates around you and really have them cheering you on. We also have a World of Work trip, so they will get to go to either a local workplace or sometimes based in London, and they get to have a tour of the workplace they're visiting. They get to interview people in different roles there. So even if they're going to maybe an insurance company and they're like, oh, this isn't for me, but they get to interview people who are in the finance department or the HR department and see that actually to make an organization run and be successful, there's lots of different skills and interests that are involved. And actually, maybe they could see themselves in a career in that area. Um, so yeah, and then at the end of the 5 to 6 months where we're in school with them, we then kind of steer them onto a path of self-coaching where they do that for a further 6 months. And they get a little workbook that they can dip into if they want, but it's really kind of harnessing those skills that they've learned with their coach over the previous months and putting them into place for themselves going forward so that they can continue to grow in the 4 talents that we focus on, which are confidence, resilience, communication, and self-awareness.
Wow. So it sounds like there's a whole portfolio of services on offer through the charity. I wondered if we could zoom in on the transition that students go through between primary and secondary school. I know you mentioned it's exciting and challenging. I think for me, the word terrifying comes to mind when I think back to it, which was a fair while ago. I wondered, what challenges do students do you see come up in that space, and how do you support the young people with that huge transition?
I'm trying to think back to kind of my own time at school because I personally haven't worked with any of the primary students, but looking back, I went to a primary school um that was near where my grandparents lived because they helped me while my mum they kind of helped bring me up while my mum was at work. So I think for me, one of the biggest things when I went from primary to secondary school is that I knew none of my classmates were going to be joining me because when I went to secondary school, it was going to be nearer to my house. And so that's something that I think a lot of students can still go through is that, oh my God, who am I going to be friends with? Who am I going to talk to at lunch? And that can be a big thing. But also the way that kind of just the logistics of day-to-day life at school. I think in most, if not all primary schools, you're in the same classroom with the same teacher every day for all of your lessons. And then at secondary school, you're going from classroom to classroom in probably a school that is much bigger. You're having lessons with different teachers who have different expectations of you and maybe discipline in different ways. And I think that can create a lot of anxiety around how am I meant to behave and what's expected of me. And I've got to keep on top of my studies as well with lessons that I'm not used to doing. And I think it's a big change. And especially for we are still in that time where COVID has had a big impact on education, and like it was only 4 years ago, so there are still students probably coming to the end of primary school now where they might have more anxiety than someone 5 or 6 years ago would have going up to secondary school.
So there's a huge demand for that service, perhaps more than ever now, with what that generation has encountered with the pandemic and all. It's funny, I remember that feeling very much like going from a big fish in a primary school and a little primary school to being a very little fish in, like you say, a very, very big school. And there was lots of rumors, the big kids are going to flush your head down the toilet. They're going to, sprog you and steal all your stuff on day one. You got to really fear the big kids. I know there's a school up the road which a friend's child goes to, and they actually mix year groups. So you get two people from every year group in a tutor group, and they have a dedicated coach. And the parents only speak through the coach. To speak to any of the teachers, they always go through the coach, which is totally, vastly different to what I encountered at school. And it's amazing to hear that those kind of institutions and establishments exist these days.
I think that sounds amazing, and the fact there's like a sort of call for parents and students, and there's that like common person that they can speak to, is they need that stability and like kind of knowing who they can go to and feel safe speaking to. So that sounds brilliant.
Agreed. To come back to coaching, Tracy, you mentioned, through Yes Futures, you occasionally you don't get roped in, you volunteer to coach some of the young people. I wondered if you could take us right back to the beginning of your coaching journey when you first discovered it and decided to train as a coach.
Yeah, so I was doing an admin role, and I was starting to think that maybe it wasn't for me. And I I'd gone through a lot of changes. So I'd gone through a breakup. I was living back home with my mum. Um, I was in kind of like my third main job after leaving uni, and it wasn't feeling right. And I felt I needed more genuine connection with people than being at the end of the phone, kind of listening to complaints about deliveries not being made on time and this not working. And I was like, there's got to be more genuine conversations I can have with people about things that really matter. And I got talking to a friend who had trained with Animas, and I was like, that sounds really good. That like just having conversations for a living. How amazing is that? And so she told me about the course, and I went along to one of the introductory days. I can still remember it so clearly. We had a talk from. So I don't know if it's still done this way, but it was a holiday in London, and one of the trainers was kind of doing a presentation about what the course was like, and then after lunch, in the room opposite, they had some of the students doing one of their modules, and they invited a couple in to talk about it, and I'd kind of already sealed the deal in my mind, but then. I'm sure many people watching this will know Bronwyn Nash, who is now a trainer with Animas. But she told me about her experience, or she told all of us about her experience, and just the way she spoke about the course and how much she had got from it. That was the final thing for me. I was like, yeah, this is the one for me. I didn't look at any other schools. I went on my friend's recommendation, and I thought if I don't like it when I get to the introductory day, then I can carry on looking, but I did, so I didn't need to look elsewhere.
Wow. Thanks, Bronwyn, if you're watching all this. Credit where credit's due. No, she is one of our much loved trainers, as we all are, actually. That's really great to hear, Tracy. And how did your journey with Animas sort of begin, and then lead on to also you deciding to train 2 years later as a coaching supervisor as well?
So I think for me, it was I'm from the old school lot who actually got to go to Regent's University for 2 days each month and do the course in person. For back then, that's something that was really important to me. I knew that I learned best in a classroom environment, in person with people around me. And I'm so glad I had that opportunity to do that. I think it also helped me grow a lot in confidence that we were doing it in person, not behind a screen. And I think for me, it was that kind of building regularly on what you were learning. So the fact that there was a different module each month, you could kind of take what you'd learnt previous month and then what you were learning this month and build on it and bring it into your practice sessions that you were doing with each other. And then having continued to do coaching after completing the program, it kind of very quickly came round to that time of the pandemic and lockdown, and it was just seeing the kindness and supportiveness in the Animas community. A group of coaches decided they wanted to set up a pro bono opportunity for people who could benefit from coaching but maybe couldn't access it easily, and I volunteered on that. And that's when I really started to grow in confidence, was um, actually working with people who weren't fellow coaches on the course and just having those conversations that I had longed for when I wanted to leave my admin role. um, and then I can't really remember. I had a friend who had trained with Animas and then was doing the supervision course, and she was posting bits here and there about what she was learning. And I was like, well, being a supervisor sounds a bit scary, but from what I'm seeing, what she's sharing is just going to enhance my kind of skill set for coaching. So I kind of went into it with not necessarily thinking I would be a supervisor and that I could just build on my skill set as a coach, but I really enjoyed it. And when you know a lot of coaches, it kind of makes sense that your next step is to then support some of those coaches and hold space for them in the same way that maybe some of them held space for you when you were training as coaches together. So, yeah, it was the next logical step for me, and I've really enjoyed it.
That's really good to hear, Tracy. I wondered if you can enlighten us on what do what what do we mean by supervision and becoming a coaching supervisor, and how is it different from being a coach?
Yeah, so I guess I I think the easiest way I can explain it is sometimes things come up in coaching sessions and you think, oh, I could handle that better, or should I have asked this question instead, or oh, did I do the right thing there? Or well, it's not a therapeutic space, but coaching can be a very cathartic space, and maybe something comes up that affects you and you can't show that in the space, but you need to talk to someone about it afterwards, and that's a great space for supervision. um it's someone that you can talk to, because sometimes being a coach can be very lonely, and having a supervisor that you can talk things through that have happened in your session. It's a great way for your development as a coach to have that sounding board. It's a fantastic way of making sure you're sticking to those core competencies set out by the ICF. Um, yeah, it's that support for you. So I kind of see it as you're supporting your clients, your coachees, and your supervisor is supporting you. And actually working with a supervisor benefits not only you as the coach, but also your client, because you're bringing what you learn in supervision to your client in future sessions.
Thanks, Tracy. I love the concept of a two-tier support system.
Mhm.
Kind of you're supporting your client and your supervisor supporting you as the coach. Um, I'm wondering what the value would be of having a supervisor for a coach. So, such as myself, I often feel quite drained after one or two coaching sessions, especially when we've gone really deep in the session and had a really heartfelt conversation, a lot of emotions in that space. And perhaps I've felt quite triggered as well if the topic has been quite close to home. Now I'm wondering, what the value would be to someone like me as a coach for having, a supervisor and what that could offer for me personally and for my professional practice as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's exactly that. It's that support for you. And if a coach finds that they're leaving sessions feeling drained, then I would 100% recommend. I'd recommend regular supervision anyway, because it's great to make sure that kind of you're staying on track with your development. But if you're finding that you're feeling drained, and dare I say it, that maybe you're dreading the next session with a particular client, then going to supervision can help you to get to the bottom of why you're feeling that way. And in the same way, we go to coaching because we're getting in our own way sometimes and we're not quite able to unpick quite what it is that's blocking us. Then supervision can do that for a coach who's not quite sure what's what's not going the right way with a client, and hopefully it'll improve you, how you feel as a coach, but it'll also improve your relationship with your client. And sometimes it may but even end up being, actually, I don't think I should be working with this client anymore. And then you can prepare and how to have that conversation so that you're still ending the relationship on good terms, and kind of encouraging that client to go out and find a coach that is a good fit for them. Because I think it's important to remember that we're not always going to be a good fit for the people that come to us for coaching, and that's okay. Not everyone is going to click immediately. Not everyone is going to be able to build that rapport that makes a really good coaching relationship. And I think that's so important to remember.
Thanks, Tracy. So it's a way of ensuring you can add even more value to your coachees as a coach by, almost regulating and standardizing your practice and being able to bring things into that space with your supervisor that might have been draining or triggering and might lead to a difficult conversation happening at some point with that client, for
And
example.
one of the things that I always say when I'm looking to work with a new client is I have regular supervision, and while our conversations are private and to a certain extent confidential, there may be things that I would like to speak to my supervisor about to get more clarity around. And while I would keep you anonymous, um, would it be okay if I share some of the things that we talk about? Because in the long run, it's going to help you and your goals further down the line. So yeah, and I think, kind of going slightly off topic, but if I had gone down the counselling route instead of the coaching route, which I did consider very briefly at one point, that's regulated. I would have to have regular supervision. And whilst coaching is unregulated at the moment, I think it's still so important that every coach has regular supervision so that they can keep on top of their development, keep on top of their own well-being, um, and be the best coach that they can be for their clients.
Mm. I wondered, Tracy, just a final sort of question on the supervision front. From a practical perspective, I'm a coach with a coach of my own, but what's the difference between the session I'll have with my coach, where at the minute we discuss things like building my business, defining my brand, who I'm going to work with, how to have enrollment conversations, etc., etc. what would be different about coming to a supervision session, and kind of what would we do within it?
So, I think you actually said it quite well there yourself. So the work you do with your coach is about your business, and kind of how you're portraying yourself to the outer world and your potential clients. Whereas for me, the supervision is about you as a coach and about your clients. Um, so it's furthering your development, your training, making sure you feel mentally and physically well going into sessions. So yeah, when you're working with a coach, it's your business. When you're working with a supervisor, it's about you and your client.
Thanks, Tracy. And it was a good shout out earlier to the fact that coaching is an unregulated industry at the moment, despite the fact I think there's three major accrediting organisations. It's still unregulated, and it's a lovely way to add value to your coaching offering, to say, oh, the work we do is actually will be supervised and sort of, will be reviewed to ensure that I'm offering the most quality and the best value to you as my client and my coachee. So to turn the focus, bring the focus and the light spotlight back onto you, Tracy. I know that you've had a very powerful journey with coaching, and it's led to some really huge personal outcomes for you, involving deciding to be a solo mum. So I wondered, I'd love to ask you more about that journey.
Yeah, of course. So, yeah, I I mentioned briefly that coaching came about after a breakup and moving back home, and around that time I had a bit of counselling, and I'd had this realization that actually, while the breakup hurt, what was upsetting me more was that I was even further away again from becoming a mum. It, at that point, I was I I can't remember how old I was, but I was starting to think, if I if I have to go down that road of meeting the right person and then making sure they're the right person that I want to have a child with, being in a relationship long enough to kind of get married, and then how long do we want to wait before having children? And I was going through all of this in my head without even meeting someone. So I was like, I was going into a relationship for completely the wrong reasons in my mind. And this all came out in counselling, and the counsellor said, "Why don't you do it by yourself?" And I was like, "Say what now?" So she kind of planted that seed, and it was just left growing at the back of my mind without, I was just letting it get on with it. And then um we had the presence session with Animus. So anyone who's done the course will know that there is an exercise where basically the only thing the coach is allowed to say is, "And is there anything else you would like to add to that?" Or something along those lines. I might be getting it a bit wrong. Um, so I remember sitting with one of my classmates in Regent's Park, lovely sunny day, and I thought, if I'm not going to be interrupted, I'm just going to go for it. I'm just going to let everything out about how I want to be a mum, how I don't know if doing it by myself is the right way to go about it. And I just kept letting everything out, which felt brilliant. But the magic came at the end when we finished the exercise and it was lunchtime. I won't say her name, I'll keep her private. But my classmate said, I wanted to stay present and do the exercise properly, but would you mind me sharing something that might help? And I was like, no, of course. She said, I've actually looked into this myself, and if you go to this clinic, they do regular talks on potentially becoming a solo mum. You can go along. And so I did. I booked on, went to the talk, got all the information I needed. At that point, I thought, I've got a bit of time. I'm 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 not in too much of a rush. I've still like I'm heading towards geriatric parent, but I've got time. I can take time to really think about this. And then it was a couple of years later, I went to the talk again just to make sure nothing had changed. Had the fertility MOT, which was a blood test and a scan just to see what my fertility levels were like. Got the results that said my fertility levels looked good, but I had a cyst, so I'd have to go for a scan in another month to make sure it had disappeared. And then guess what? Lockdown happened. So, so I like everything was good to go ahead, and then it couldn't. I think they were, because it was non-urgent treatment, I think they were progressing with the ones that had started but weren't starting any new ones. So then nothing happened until kind of towards the end of 2020. Then at the end of that year, I was preparing for my first round of treatment, which I went with basic insemination, which is like as natural as you can get. I was like, let's just see how this goes. Um, that didn't work in the January 21, so I decided I was going to go for IVF, because it's more expensive, but if it works, you've got more chances to get pregnant, because basically with IVF, they collect all your eggs and then they can fertilize those with one vial of sperm. Instead of insemination, you have to buy a vial each time you try it. So you can see how that would quickly get expensive. That I ended up with one embryo, which didn't take. So then I had a few months where I had read a book on kind of how you could potentially improve egg quality, worked on that, took loads of vitamin D because we live in Britain and apparently that's an issue with the lack of sun. And then it was early 2022 when I went for my second round of IVF and ended up with 5 embryos this time. The first one they put in with me ended up with my son, who arrived in December 22, and I had 4 embryos on ice up until recently, when I decided that he was enough for me, and um, I decided as much as I would love a sibling for him, I don't think I could go through the pregnancy or the birth mentally, physically, emotionally again. And my clinic, you got the first year free for the embryo freeze, and then you had to pay a direct debit each month. And in my mind, that's money that I could be spending on him. So it was a difficult decision to let those other embryos go, but I know it was the right one for us. So yeah, so that I do believe that presence session in my training had a lot to do with me having the courage to go for it and become a solo mum.
Wow. I mean, thank you so much, Tracy. I'm sure anyone listening will be extremely thankful that you shared that story and the way you shared that story, and deeply moved as I am. And I just want to say just a huge thank you, and also congratulations and a slightly belated welcome to the world for your son. It's such a powerful story, and just a huge shout out to you for just the resilience that you have shown, and what it must have taken to go through that whole journey. I can't begin to imagine.
Yeah, there were times and I know people who, since me doing it, have kind of gone through the process themselves, and they've said, "Oh, at any point did you kind of just wonder if you were doing the right thing?" And I very occasionally thought, "Oh, should I be doing this?" And then it just always came back to you. Like I remember I did a writing challenge once, and the topic I wrote about was becoming a mum. And I just remember being little and being asked, "What do you want to be when you grow up?" And everyone would be like, "Firefighter, astronaut." And all I ever wanted to be was a mum. And it's like, it's not a paid occupation, but it is still a very big thing to be in life. You might not get paid for it, but you can totally be a mum. And like, that's amazing to say, yeah, I want to be a mum one day. But I felt I had to say like nurse or teacher or something when all I really wanted to do was play with my dollies. And yeah,
Wow. Wow. The first time on one of these interviews, I'm just lost for words, just lost for words. And it's such a huge testament to you and following your heart and knowing so early what you wanted to be, who you wanted to become. It was within you so many years ago. And now, what was it like becoming the person who you always wanted to be?
everything I hoped for, yet nothing like I expected at all at the same time. Like, the day I brought him home, I felt like he had always been here, and it's been like that ever since. Yet your whole life is turned upside down, and I wouldn't have it any other way, but it's tiring. You're constantly tidying up. I I saw a video on Instagram yesterday, which was just kind of a guy pretending to be a toddler, just creating mess everywhere, and the parent running around after tidying up. And it does feel like that. And sometimes, some days I do that, and other days I'm just like, gonna wait till he goes to bed and clear it up. Logical, sensible choice, but sometimes you just feel like you have to be constantly following them around, tidying up. And it's definitely it's definitely a role I'm growing into. Like, I constantly question myself, am I doing the right thing? Should I be doing more for him? Should I be taking him out to places more? And like, we've done tiny talk since last September, which is sign language for babies and toddlers, and he loves going to that. And just last week I started doing swimming lessons. And when I was pregnant, I'd told myself I would be starting swimming lessons as soon as he was old enough. And it didn't happen until last week because I needed that confidence to take him and be there with him. And it completely changes you. And but I wouldn't have it any other way, even with the difficult days.
Thanks, Tracy. I mean, wow. I don't think there could be ever any greater testament to coaching than that outcome, if you could call it that. It's of you coming to that decision, and just a massive shout out to your coach for being brave enough to ask your permission to share their thoughts. We're constantly talking about the challenge of sharing advice in a coaching session because it's not mentoring, it's coaching. But actually, there is a space for sharing your reflections in coaching. I'm sure you'd agree. And the right way to do it is to ask permission first, which is exactly what your coach did. And
Yeah.
look at the power of them asking, the power of the question. Wow, it's right there. Maybe we'll call the article that.
Yeah, and I think that's something kind of like we're told in at the very beginning of our training, that you will change as a person when you train as a coach, and some of your friends and family might not like you for it. But it's the power of the question. If my friends are kind of asking for advice or wanting a rant, I'm like, okay, what do you want right now? Do you want me to be a friend? And if so, do you want advice or to rant, or do you want me to be a coach in this situation? And I will listen, and I will pose some questions that might be able to help. But I think it is so important to kind of clarify what your role is going to be in a particular situation, because you do change when you go through that training. You learn to listen, really listen. And I think I did a training recently, and I remember something from one of the weeks where if you're truly listening to someone, you don't know what you're going to say until they finish talking. And that has stuck with, that's kind of renewed the work that I did in the training of just listen. Don't think about what you're going to say next. Just listen. And I think that's so important in our day-to-day relationships, because how many times do you just want to share what's on your mind and get it out? But if you can hold back, there's quite often gold there.
Thank you, Tracy. We often talk about the power of less is more in coaching conversations. And I know favorite book of mine is Simplifying Coaching by Claire Pedrick, and recommended by the course as well. And I mean, I'm just curious to know, because you mentioned that in that coaching session led you to that incredible insight and decision to become a solo mom. What exactly did your coach do in that session that created that space and enabled your thoughts to develop?
Yeah, well, as I said, it was a presence exercise where the only thing the coach was allowed to ask was, is there anything else you would like to add? And so it was space. The coach gave me space. And when I thought I was done speaking, and she said, is there anything else you would like to add? More kept coming. So every time I thought I was done, she helped me realize I wasn't. And she helped me get it all out of my mind and out into the open where it started to make sense. So every thought, feelings, fear, other people's opinions that weren't my own, that maybe I was worrying about things that I wasn't even worrying about. It was what other people might think. And I hadn't even shared this with anyone yet. And I was worrying what other people would think. And so, yeah, she just gave me space to get it all out. And yeah, sometimes coaching can be as simple as not saying anything and just giving your client space, because they don't get that from family, friends, colleagues. Everyone wants to give advice. And sometimes you want that advice, but with people sometimes you don't know if they're giving the advice they think you want. They could be giving you advice that neither of you might realize it, but actually benefits them. With a coach who doesn't know, yeah, you might have got to know them in the sessions that you've been having, but they don't know you on that personal level. If you ask for advice and you're really insistent on it, and the coach then gives advice, they're coming from a completely different place to people that you really know in your personal life.
Or it's a shout out to the power of the gift of giving someone space in a coaching session, and less is more sometimes. Well, thank you so much for sharing, Tracy. And how did the first swimming lesson go with your son?
So I mean, I'm clumsy. I think he enjoyed it more than me, because it's a very shallow swimming pool. So there was a lot of on my knees, and I'm not a strong swimmer either. So there was a lot more of, oh God, am I doing this right? And yeah, I wish I'd started a bit sooner with him, but he's such a water baby. Like we had our second lesson this morning, and at one point I was just helping him glide on his back, and he looks so serene. I was like, there's two things that I want for him that I never managed as a child, and that was learning to swim and riding a bike. And he looks so chilled and peaceful in water that I think I'm going to nail at least one of those for him. So
Watch out, British Olympic swimming team is coming for
Lovely.
all the Tour de France, whatever he shit, the British cycling team. Wow. So, Tracy, where are we now? I'm lost for words. I'm lost for words. I think I just want to ask you finally about your decision you've taken to dial down your personal coaching practice. Perhaps you are using coaching, and the ways that you are using coaching in your work for Yes Futures. How you made that decision, and yeah, if someone has resonated with your story, as I'm sure so many people will, and would love to contact you, get in touch, how they can do that. So I apologize for there being 3 questions there.
So, so how I came to the decision to dial down. Yeah. So being a solo mum, obviously a lot to consider around how long to have off the maternity leave, things like that. And only working 3 days a week with Yes Futures, I made the decision early on that I would only take 12 weeks maternity because that's what I got full pay. And then I was able to use kind of holiday that I built up and kit days to do I was so blessed with Yes Futures. I was able to do a phased return. So I think I did something like a month of 1 day a week, and then I was going to do a month of 2 days a week, but then it coincided with Easter and May, which is like the mega bomb of bank holidays in the spring. So I think I ended up with 6 weeks of 2 days a week, and then went back to my 3 days a week. And I think the reason I decided to dial down the coaching was it's I hadn't built my practice to a point where it was bringing in really regular income. So for me, it was more important to have that part-time role that was my regular income. Despite the fact I work from home, I'm really lucky. I've got a garden office, so going to my job every day at the bottom of the garden allowed me that bit of separation. Working became my me time. You said about kind of that identity loss as a mum. It's where I could be something other than mum. I could be finance and admin officer for Yes Futures and kind of do that 1, 2, 3 days a week. But equally, I've been so lucky that I've got a couple of clients that I've worked with previously where if they've been like, oh, do you know what? I think I just need a one-off session. And I'm like, yeah, sure. And that's what I love about it is that um, I've got that flexibility. I've learnt those core skills. I kind of keep up to date with training and stuff. I've recently done Animas's neurodiversity and coaching course. So I've got the books, the podcast trainings that I can dip into. Bit of coaching at work as and when they need me. So when someone contacts me to say, oh, could I have a coaching session, please? Yeah, of course, 100%. We find a time that works for both of us. That's really important to me now, because on my days that I'm not with Yes Futures, I do want to go out and do things with my son. But equally, I love the coaching. I love the supervision. So if someone wants a session, I'm not going to knock it back. And I'm now starting to think about how I want to build it back up again and what that might look like. And it's never going to be the other 4 days that I'm not working at Yes Futures. It's going to be filled with coaching and supervision. But I would love it where maybe I have a session Thursday, Friday, Saturday afternoon, and just keep it. I do it because I love it. I'd love it if it could be my full income stream, but equally, I love being part of a team with Yes Futures, and that's where that balance comes in. Is I when I when I was looking to do the coaching, I thought I didn't like my admin roles. It wasn't. It was that I didn't like the toxic culture of the places that I was working. So when I left that, I struggled to understand why I was missing it, and it's just because I wasn't in the right environment. So whereas I loved colleagues that I worked with, I'm still in touch with some of them. The actual work environment wasn't right. So now that I've got that, I don't think I'd ever want to fully leave like an employed role because I like being part of a team. But equally, I love the coaching, I love the supervision. I don't want to lose that either. So it's a three-way, probably more than three-way balancing act now because of volunteering things that I do outside of work, and looking after my son. But it's I like the variety. I like jumping from different things, and I like having those genuine conversations that mean something to people. So yeah, I think
But thanks for
you
sharing.
well,
Thanks for sharing, Tracy. Your journey, aligns so well with mine in terms of work and how work's working for you, with my role at Animas and my coaching alongside. And I also would echo the love of the flexibility that coaching offers, working part-time for a company and having all the benefits of that, and working in a team and that community spirit, and then also working solo, as an entrepreneur, running your own business, and being able to pick and choose who you work with, when you work, how you work, and all of the rest of it can be quite daunting, having all those options, a little bit of analysis paralysis and options overload, but it can also be really empowering as you can effectively dial up when and how you work. And it's great to know it is possible to, dial it right down and then dial it back up again, as I'm sure you will, as and when the time is right. Um, so no, the best part about my role is I get to, tell the stories of inspirational people like yourself, which we've definitely done today. It's been so fabulous to hear. And I'm sure everyone will enjoy watching, listening, reading your story. So yeah, just as a final closing question, if someone would like to connect with you and find out more and follow you, how might they do that? Where can we find you?
so I'm not great on social media. I post a lot of Marvel and Harry Potter memes. But I am on Instagram, Tracy Newbury-Abegg. But my profile is private at the moment, so if you want to connect, I'd also say drop me a DM. I'm also on LinkedIn, same name, so please do come and find me.
Thanks, Tracy. It's been a pleasure to be on Words, to have you here today to hear your story. Thank you so much for sharing, and hopefully we'll have you on the channel again soon.
Oh, thank you.